Welcome to the Happiness Matters podcast, where we'll explore happiness at work and show you how to coach yourself to be happier there and more successful too, no matter what.
Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining me, Julia Seal, for today's discussion on menopause at work, and your negative emotions. This is a slightly longer episode, as this is the first time I've addressed this topic on the podcast, and I want to give you an overview of current menopause thinking and then offer you a coaching perspective and some coaching tips. Last week, we did a different self-coaching episode for the 28th of January, Fun at Work Day. We looked at your thoughts and feelings about the day, using them to learn to coach ourselves in order to get the results, the life experience that we might want from the day. And the intention of that episode was to show you how everything in your life, every day, whatever it is, presents an opportunity to coach yourself, an opportunity to evolve yourself, a perfect opportunity to create and craft your version of happy and successful no matter what. And I have to laugh at myself because, as I also said last week, I used to enjoy these types of special days, and now I'm often just grumpy about them. And yes, this might be because of the employee engagement work I do at strategic levels in corporates and how it translates on the ground, but it could just as easily be my menopause negative emotion of irritation, one I carry around with me often nowadays like a handbag. And no, not my favorite Coach tog bag. Coach in Regent Street, London, not Coach, as in your coach. So in today's episode, we look at a key feature of our coaching work together here. The impact of menopause on you, menopause at work, and the opportunity it provides to step into the next level version of ourselves. Mostly, we're examining the negative emotions surrounding menopause and your lived experience of them. Those negative emotions that seem to explode into our lives unexpectedly during our midlife transition. And this supports the mini coaching journey we've been on together recently. How to coach your negative emotions, those uncontrollable feelings of unhappiness, being out of control, anxiety, feeling powerless, hopeless, shame, frustration, and exhaustion. If the menopause at work, menopause and happiness conversation today appeals to you, if you want to know more about the opportunity that this transition or Bardo time provides you with, to evolve, to cultivate and craft our deepest happiness in a meaningful, conscious life, please sign up to my blog where I dig deeper into this topic. You can sign up to my mailing list by visiting Happiness-Matters.coach and choosing subscribe from the menu bar. Let's first get a grip on what menopause is and what this topic is doing on this podcast, which is about happiness and success and learning to coach yourself within the context of work. Now, the menopause topic might not be relevant to some of you who are listening, but it's actually a highly relevant topic, whether it's you who is in your midlife and noticing the effects of menopause, or whether it's a colleague or a family member, and even more so if you're a manager of anyone who is going through this life transition. The quick answer to what is the menopause is that it's the time of life when a woman stops having her menstrual periods for 12 months. It's called the climacteric, and it is the opposite of menarche, the time when a girl's period starts in puberty. Interestingly, the word menopause was invented by French doctors as far back as the early 1800s from the Greek word pausis, pause, and men, month, so the end of monthly cycles. Also interesting, other female creatures around the world go through the menopause. Chimpanzees, elephants, pilot and killer whales, and the budgie, would you believe? And dogs and cats don't. But I digress. Menopause usually happens around the age of 51, 52, but there's a long period beforehand where you might experience various symptoms. This is called perimenopause and can start even in your 30s, but usually in your mid-40s. And then there's the time afterwards, post-menopause, where symptoms can go on for more than a decade. This end of our reproductive years is a completely natural part of aging as a female human. Menopause is a stage in our lives, not an illness. Menopause is a natural transition, not a health problem or a disease. However, it does come with a lot of physical and mental changes that can have an enormous effect on us. As well as all the physical symptoms of menopause, this time of midlife also tends to coincide with other big life-changing events. Children leave home, we're promoted to more senior and demanding and responsible jobs. We finally feel the burnout effects of years of stress, anxiety, and overwork. We might be retrenched, we retire, we get divorced, we become grannies, we are caring for our aged relatives, or we lose our parents. So all of these midlife transitions, what happens to us physically, emotionally, in our brains and bodies, what happens to our relationships, our sense of identity, and what gives our lives meaning and purpose, how we think about our own death, these are all things we need to consider when we talk about our deepest happiness and success in our lives. Interestingly, it is our lives at work and our relationships that seem to take the brunt of the midlife and menopause transition. Let's take a quick look at some of the symptoms, and you can ask yourself how much of these are standing in the way, affecting your happiness and your success in your daily life. Take hot flushes, for example, the most common of the menopausal symptoms. 75% of women will experience hot flushes for between 4 and 15 years, an experience of sudden heat spreading over the body like you've been set on fire. I mean, seriously, it does feel like that, doesn't it? So for 30 seconds to 15 minutes, you feel like a furnace has exploded inside you. You get an exercise red face, blotches on your body, drenching sweat, dizziness, and heart palpitations. And how many of you have had to sit in a boardroom presentation or even give a presentation in the midst of this experience? It's just great. By the way, one trick I have learned is that breathing through the hot flush can help. So if you don't already have it, please download my free coaching tool, 3 Long Strong Breaths, and I've put the link in the show notes for you on the website Happiness-Matters.coach. How about brain fog? Working through those days of fatigue and forgetfulness, the inability to focus or to make anything stick in your brain. You can't remember the names of new colleagues you met just 5 minutes ago, or even old colleagues at your monthly team meeting, or your phone's passcode. 2/3 of menopausal women suffer with memory and concentration issues over this period. And for me, this has again been one of the worst symptoms I've experienced. The other really difficult one for me has been more emotional. The mood swings between my calm, happy, normal, and extreme irritability for seemingly no reason. What seems so incredible to me is that despite all my meditation training over the last decade, I can be left wondering who this person of the ratty mood and irritable snaps and sighs actually is. I got remarried about the time that I started going through menopause, and I built a new house. I think Fraser thought on some days he'd married a complete stranger. How about those of you who haven't had a decent night's sleep in years? Unrefreshing sleep, lighter sleep, woken up by hot flushes and night sweats, leading to worsened daytime tiredness, which leads to less resilience emotionally, less resilience to stress, and further reduced ability to focus and remember things. There are many more symptoms of menopause you might be experiencing wherever you are on this transition. Low mood can sink into depression, loss of motivation and energy for life, incontinence, unpredictable bleeding, bizarre facial hair, reduced sex drive and pain during sex, cycles of inappropriate rages and crying, new aches and pains, unwanted weight gain, and spiraling anxiety. And it's all pretty much caused by hormonal and biochemical changes as our bodies transition from operating on the various sex hormones of progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone to operating on less or none of them, or the changing balances between them. As I record this, I am so filled with admiration for you at how incredibly well women in menopause show up in their lives every day and show up as strong, powerful women at work and at home. How my coaching clients often arrive depleted and disheartened, but still showing up for life in the best way they know how. I thought it would be interesting to briefly look at the nature-culture divide in how menopause is experienced around the world. As a biological event for women around the world, menopause is universal. However, there is limited research that tells us we experience menopause's physical and emotional symptoms differently. This is really important for us to think about how we show up as women and women leaders in multicultural, diverse workplaces. But also for ourselves. It's an opportunity to learn from each other in how we make sense of menopause for ourselves individually in our own lives. Various anthropological studies show women in different cultures experience the actual physical symptoms of menopause differently. So women in the United States, France, Canada, and the United Kingdom experience more prevalent symptoms when it comes to hot flushes, weight gain, and disrupted sleep than women in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Italy. Other studies tell us that Japanese women suffer less from hot flushes and more from acute shoulder stiffness, while Chinese women in Hong Kong suffer more from joint and muscle pain, with women in India suffering less overall. So fascinating, isn't it? There are definitely not enough studies to clarify what's going on here and to explain the inter- and intra-cultural differences or the exact role that our differing genetics, lifestyle, diet, physical environment, or exercise plays. The most marked difference between us is how menopause is referenced in our cultural narratives, what we believe about menopause, the way we think and feel about it. In Western cultures, we tend towards idolizing youth, and so menopause for many of us is seen as an ending, a time of deterioration and decline, almost like a disease. Certainly not as a contributor to our future happiness and success. In other cultures, menopause is seen as transformative, a life transition into a time of wisdom, an opportunity for self-actualization, even a time of liberation. Mayan women looked forward to menopause as it provided newfound freedom and status. Indian women from Rajasthan, previously veiled and secluded before menopause, come downstairs from their women's quarters to where the men drink and are now allowed to visit and joke with them. As researchers from Yale Medical School say, in societies where age is more revered and the older woman is the wiser and better woman, menopausal symptoms are significantly less bothersome. Where older is not better, many women equate menopause with old age, and symptoms can be much more devastating. So interesting, isn't it? Looking at menopause through these various lenses does make a mockery of the so-called work-life distinction and the ongoing conversations about work-life balance. By the way, this is core to my philosophy at Happiness Matters. There is no distinction between work and life. Work, life, life? Like work is not life? These aspects of our lives are truly impossible to separate out. We cannot separate who we are at work and home. Yes, we might show up different aspects of our personalities, but we are whole beings. And here with me at Happiness Matters, we are always considering our whole being happiness. Here on the podcast, we do this mainly through the lens of work, but my coaching with my clients looks at whole being, who you are now, who you want to be in the world, and are you living the best version of yourself? Whole being happiness. Some countries are way ahead in terms of seeing employees as whole beings, taking the effects of menopause into consideration when dealing with the women in their businesses. In many organizations worldwide, we have progressed from maternity leave to paternity leave, and now menopause is the next frontier. Which reminds me of what I was talking about in last week's episode about working hours and Robert Owen's 1817 slogan, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. Of the world's 195 countries, only 52 of them have agreed to the hours of work convention by the International Labour Organization. So if this is the case, then you can imagine that the steps needing to be taken towards improving conditions for maternity leave, paternity leave, and menopause are going to be even further behind. At the forefront for the menopause at work conversation seems to be the United Kingdom, which, as I'm recording this podcast, leaves the European Union through the Brexit process today. What an upset in the world's history this is. We're going to feel the repercussions for years. While all the Brexit conversations were going on in 2019, so were strides being made about menopause at work in the UK. Pretty revolutionary was the Labour Party's unveiling of a new policy at their party conference. The policy proposes several requirements of large organizations, employers over 250 people. Under this policy, these employers need to provide flexible hours to women experiencing menopause. They must train managers on the effects of menopause. And this would be useful in any workplace, as research tells us that most women are unwilling to discuss menopause-related health problems with their manager. They would also need to ensure absence procedures are flexible and without discrimination. Then, other recommendations included changes to the actual work environment, things like adequate ventilation and access to cold water, which is surely a no-brainer for any employee, really. Ultimately, the policy wants large organizations to treat menopause like a long-term fluctuating health condition. Of course, there has been a backlash against this view. English broadcaster and newspaper columnist Julia Hartley-Brewer was very vocal, summing it up by saying, "Generations of women fought against the idea that women were too frail and emotional to be trusted with education, jobs, the vote, equal rights, and pay. Now, the new feministas claim women need special rights at work when they get periods and go through menopause. For F's sake." ACAS, the UK's advisory, conciliation and arbitration service that provides advice to employers and employees, has already published some guidelines for menopause at work that I will include in the show notes to this episode for you in case you're interested. Further, some UK organisations, universities, media houses, city councils and police forces have already gone ahead with creating menopause policies. These seem to be mainly focused on educating managers to look out for early warning signs of poor well-being and to ensure that it's not an embarrassing conversation. Some go further, empowering managers to agree flexible working hours, all in service of reducing absenteeism and keeping productivity high, which is what it's really about, isn't it? In the United States, menopause is not covered by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so it's not reported exactly how many organizations are already making provision for their menopausal employees. But think about this. In the States, there are more than 33 million women employed over age 45. And so 33 million women are working in the midst of these physical and emotional symptoms. There's not much other robust data worldwide at the moment, but we do know that we have a long way to go to get worldwide consistency on the basic hours of work and conditions of work. So it will be an even longer way to go to get worldwide consistency on how best to support women at work through menopause. I'd love to hear from all of you across the world. What are your personal experiences of menopause at work? You can send me your thoughts through our website or post on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. The address for all of them is Happiness-Matters.coach. Where we are fortunate in the menopause conversation is that there are so many more women in business nowadays, and so many more women in leadership positions, women who are senior enough and powerful enough to change the conversations in business and to bring the menopause conversation to the fore. And yes, this is progress indeed, but it's not the whole story. The next step of this, and where my Happiness Matters coaching comes in, is to consider that menopause is actually to be embraced, even enjoyed, and used to contribute, if not to actually even jumpstart and fuel our no matter what happiness and success, at work and at home, our whole being happiness. Let's talk more about this now. The opportunity that menopause presents us from my Happiness Matters coaching perspective. Since we are still on our mini negative emotions coaching journey, let's stay focused on the negative experiences of menopause and how they impact us. As I said earlier, our lives at work and our relationships seem to take the brunt of the midlife menopause transition the most. There is an excess of negative emotions for many of us. First, there are the menopause emotions stirred up by the physical and biochemical changes taking place in our bodies: irritability, anxiety, low mood, exhaustion. Then, there are all the emotions that are created by our beliefs and thoughts about menopause. Are we seeing menopause as an exciting new chapter in our life journey, or are we seeing it as deterioration and decline? Thirdly, there are all the negative emotions related to many of the big events that seem to come with midlife: empty nest syndrome, divorce, aging parents. And lastly, on top of all of this, are the negative emotions about our negative emotions: self-judgment, I shouldn't be feeling this way, shame, and embarrassment. What can I say? OMG! If I use myself as an example. Firstly, the menopause emotions I spoke about earlier. Irritation is by far my most dominant one, and the hot flushes escalate this. My overriding message about menopause and aging from my mother has been consistently negative since I was 13. Our bodies start deteriorating from 25, so it's really only downhill from then. Getting old is so awful. You get so ugly and unattractive as you age. Then I created emotional suffering for myself around the brain fog. My late father had dementia, and so the memory and concentration issues had me worrying that I was getting dementia. Just so you know now, the menopause-related cognitive impairment can be confused with the mild cognitive impairment that precedes dementia. Early on, I experienced light and disrupted sleep, along with a heavy work and travel schedule. Then, even more emotional suffering, as I finally had to come to terms with the loss of my fertility and the sadness of not having had the opportunity to birth my own child. And of course, there's been plenty of sadness around the decline of my mother and her slow slipping away these last few months. Luckily for me, I am a coach. I have my own coach and a daily self-coaching practice. I have my meditation practice, my yoga, a kind and supportive husband, an understanding stepson, and a well-informed doctor. What I suggest you do today in your self-coaching is to explore all your own negative emotions around menopause and how they are showing up at home and at work for you. As well-being doctor and best-selling author Dr. Christine Northrup says in her book, The Wisdom of Menopause, your emotions are your inner guidance system. They alone will let you know whether you are living in an environment of biochemical health or in an environment of biochemical distress. Understanding how your thoughts and your emotions affect every single hormone and cell in your body and knowing how to change them in a way that is health enhancing gives you access to the most powerful and empowering health creating secret on earth. Please use the podcast episodes 1.17 to 1.26 Q&A to support you step by step in looking at your negative emotions in menopause. All of the coaching tools and tips I've shared with you so far in this 10-episode Insight series, this mini negative emotions coaching journey, will really help you. Specifically, these 3 coaching tools that you can download from the website, from the fun and free section, the best tool of all, 3 long, strong breaths in episode 1.19. How to download your thoughts and beliefs in episode 1.19. How to feel and process your emotions in episode 1.26 and 1.26 Q&A. Listen again to my most popular episode to date, episode 1.25, Your Next Step Evolution, and see how it applies to what we've been talking about today. And lastly, if you're really getting into coaching yourself through menopause, go back through the core self-coaching episodes of Series 1, episodes 1.1 to 1.6, as these will help you outline and create your overall coaching journey. And as an extra treat, you even get to hear me sing. Before we finish off today, I'm inviting you to go yet another step forward in your coaching, to walk towards your negative emotions, to be excited about them and why we actually want them. All our menopause negative emotions are negative thoughts about menopause and our negative experiences. Menopause midlife is the loudest call to evolve yourself. It's the greatest opportunity of your life to evolve yourself at the deepest level, using your negative emotions, your unhappy thoughts, and your difficulties at home and at work. And think about this. Now is probably not the time to radically change the circumstances of your life just yet. To leave relationships or to change jobs, even to go on another insane diet, thinking that everything will be better if you do. Now is the time to do the best work of your life, the work of you. It's time to use the menopause to fuel you, to fuel your courage to look deeply inside, to fuel your commitment to your own self-care, to fuel new thoughts, feelings, actions, and habits in how you show up for yourself and for the world. There really is no better time to do this work together. Or as Dr. Seuss, creator of my favorite Cat in the Hat, says, You'll miss the best things if you keep your eyes shut. If you do want to coach with me privately one-on-one, please go to our website Happiness-Matters.coach and click on the big yellow button called Coach with Julia. This takes you through to my calendar where you can book a free consult session with me. We'll spend 20 minutes looking at your menopause issues and how we could work together. You can also sign up to my blog where I talk more about the Bardo, the transition time of menopause and midlife, and how to use it to kickstart your life going forward. On the website, choose the subscribe button. Let's talk more. I cannot wait to meet you and coach together. I trust you enjoyed today's session, especially if you're in the middle of the menopause conversation, perimenopause or postmenopause, and wondering what on earth has happened to you and your life. Of course, if you're not in this space, I trust today has given you plenty to think about for the women in your life, your family, and your colleagues. Please share the podcast with anyone you think will benefit from what we're doing here together. Details for how they can subscribe to the podcast and mailing list are on the website, Happiness-Matters.coach. And then next week, we're digging deeper into the world of negative emotions at work. So yes, more on your menopause negative emotions, but looking specifically how they might even drive toxic behaviors at work, what to do about them if you use them or if others use them. Bye for now from a menopausally hot Cape Town summer, made even hotter by the wildfires raging in the bush area just down the road.
Thanks for joining us on this Happiness Matters podcast. Do join us again here next week on Tuesday. You can subscribe to this series at Apple Podcasts on iTunes, or you can sign up for it on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. COACH. Also, you can join our conversation on Facebook by following us there. Our Facebook page is also Happiness-Matters.coach.